All right, again, we're looking at how government policies led to inequalities still present maybe in today's society. And we're going to analyze policies of South Africa and see how that segregation and inequality, what effects it has. And so you should have read in your textbook about some different policies: the Race Classification Act, the Past Laws Act, Group Areas Act, Immorality Act, and the Black Education Act. Now, the terms are here, the definitions are not in the right spot. What you're going to have happen in just a little bit is this video will pause and there will be questions saying, hey, the Past Laws Acts, what's the definition? And then the correct answer will come up. So be prepared. Video is going to stop and it's going to go through these questions. All right, welcome back. Hopefully you got those correct, and if you've got them wrong, totally okay, because you're learning. Now, the government classified people, and they had one of the four, and not all the classifications are on here, but one of the four of these races was considered the highest. Which race was considered the highest? Now, many people have missed this one. It is Afrikaners. That is referring to the white people of South Africa. They had a language that they considered Afrikaan, which was a mix of some Dutch, because that's who settled there first, and I believe some English in there as well, which was different than many of the native languages. Which class of people was considered the lowest? It is the Bantu people. And the Bantu doesn't refer to one group of Africans. They're all different indigenous groups, but I guess you could say the Afrikaners refer to them all as one group as Bantu. Now, some of the acts that you should read about is the Population Registration Act. It required that every South African be classed into one number of racial population. Then you had the Race Classification Act. Every citizen suspected of not being from European descent was classified according to race. And they were given these cards that they had classifying them by race and picture. And you're going to see the rise of these cards and this idea really take off in the 1930s and 40s. What was going on in the 30s and 40s? Not just in South Africa, but worldwide. If you're thinking Germany, you're on the right track. You see the Germans do this to the Jewish people and tracking them. This will also be done to the Hutus and the Tutsis as well in Rwanda. So this isn't uniquely South African, but you see this priority for many people wanting to know your race and having a card that marks that race. Now, apartheid in South Africa was quite a difference between white Africa and black Africa. That separateness you can see in these numbers. I want you to take some time. You're going to look at this chart in just a little bit. You'll have some questions that will pop up on the screen about this chart. But know there are certain acts that led to why these numbers differ greatly from blacks and whites. One of these acts was the Group Area Acts. It forced people of certain races to live in certain designated areas. This would be maybe one of the hometowns that you read about in your book that they had to go live in. Many of you would look at this and go, this is a town, this is someone's house. It's lacking electricity, it's lacking water, it's lacking proper foundation and structure systems. You also have the Reservation of Separation and Amenities Act. Basically said blacks and whites can be on separate buses, separate drinking fountains, all of those things. All right, questions are going to come up, and what I'd like you to do is answer them by looking at this chart. All right, you took time to look at that. One of the things you probably noticed was black population greatly outnumbers the white population. But yet there's more black population, and yet they live on 13% of the land versus whites 87% of the land. You might have noticed the inequalities for doctors, which led to higher infant mortality rates, and even for teaching, which we got into on a different lesson. We will get into in a different lesson, how that can lead to more inequalities. Towns were separated off, fenced off. Black people had to stay in their designated area, and they could only leave if they were given written permission, and they'd have to have their passbooks on them. And here is a picture of that as well. And this is Juajito, just right outside Johannesburg. You also had the Mixed Marriage Act, which said, hey, people of different races can't get married. And if you have read Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime, it is fantastic. I highly recommend it. He talks about what it was like to be born a crime. And he talks about how his mom was black and his dad was white, and how they tried to hide that fact because if they ever found out, he would be taken away, thrown into an orphanage, and his parents would go to jail. He talks about how his mom dresses as a maid and walks behind him so people don't think that it's his mom, and how his dad shows up one day to a playground just to see him, and he yells dad, and his dad takes off running because people can't know that it's his son. Highly, highly recommend that book. And what enforced this act was the Immorality Act, which tracked down people of race or of mixed, racially mixed couples. One of the most hated laws and acts was the Pass Law Act, which said people over the age of 16 had to have this book at all times. So as we watch this video, there are two questions I want you to answer. Why did people protest, and what happens at this protest?
Every month, Esme Mayseals tends to the grave of the father she never knew, born just 2 months after his death. It's her way to honor him for losing his life at a protest against apartheid. Do you know why he went?
I don't think it would have been noble of him to remain at home.
You're proud of your father?
Very. To this day, to this moment.
On March 21st, 1960, Zacchaeus Mayseals joined 3,000 other black South Africans to protest one of the most hated restrictions against the nation's black majority, passbooks, which controlled their every movement. Lydia Mahabuke remembers. Even if you had a visitor in your house, she said, you'd have to report them to the police station. They would tell you how long your visitor could stay. Sharpeville's residents gathered peacefully in front of the police station without those passbooks. Their objective, to be arrested. But police opened fire, shooting protesters in the back as they ran for their lives.
This was the first shot hit me.
It hit you right here. Abram Mafoking still has a bullet lodged in his spine. What were you thinking?
We were all in fear. There was no time to think. We just trying to escape.
In 2 minutes, police fired more than 1,300 bullets. 69 people lay dead in the streets. Johannes Sefatsa's brother was shot in the back as he ran.
When I looked at his bed, his empty bed, he was not there. So it's then that I started crying.
Police hauled away the bodies, fearing a funeral procession of 69 hearses would spark unrest. The government delivered those caskets in the beds of trucks.
The coffins arrived closed. They never got to give us a chance to have a last glimpse of those people.
But they did not die in vain. Few knew in the days after the massacre the outrage it ignited worldwide and the calls of condemnation against South Africa's racist regime. The Sharpeville massacre also touched off 3 decades of protest in South Africa, ultimately leading to freedom for Nelson Mandela after 27 years in prison. He became South Africa's first black president in 1994 and signed the nation's new constitution in Sharpeville. Mayseals may have never known her father, but she does know his sacrifice paved the way to freedom for her daughter's generation. Michelle Miller, CBS News, Sharpeville, South Africa.